Good morning, everyone. First of all, welcome from the Department of State. We welcome you all here today to speak, inviting you to speak on the subject of should New York State adopt a more current energy conservation construction code for residential buildings. For those of you with whom we're not acquainted, my name is Joseph Hill. I'm the Assistant Director for Energy Services for the New York State Department of State Codes Division. To my right is Michael Bernetter. To his right is Mark Blanca, who is head of the Code Development Unit. And to Mark's right is Miriam McIver, who will be taking notes for us today. And last but certainly not least, newest member of our staff is Michael Saphir. We're happy to have him on board. So anyway, if you have planned on speaking today and you have not signed in, please see Michael and sign in, and also you must sign a notice of appearance form as well. So the purpose of our meeting here today, there's been considerable confusion about this. Why are we here? Well, I'm going to try to explain why we're here today. Each time the IECC, or the ICC I should say, updates its Energy Conservation Construction Code, the federal government is required, the U.S. Department of Energy is required to do an assessment of that new energy code. Does it save energy? And in this case, it does, and significantly so, especially for residential construction. So as part of the federal determination, places a requirement on states, of which we are one, to have a public hearing and to hear testimony from the public on the appropriateness of adopting or moving to that new IECC 2012 Energy Code for residential buildings today only. So that's the purpose of the hearing today. We are not going to debate what should be in the code. We are not going to alter the code in any way. We are just solely here for the purpose of hearing your comment. And again, we don't have a stenographer, but notes will be taken on the public comment. And also be aware, if you're not already aware, this session is being videotaped. Again, we had a couple of latecomers. If anyone is interested in speaking today, you must sign in and fill out a notice of appearance form. That should go to Michael.
Thank you.
As I call your name, please step to the lectern in the front. And due to the small size of the audience here today, I think we'll probably limit comments to 5 to 6 minutes. Does that seem reasonable to everyone? Okay. First speaker I have is Leo Smith, please.
Good morning. I serve as the Regional Director for the International Dark Sky Association. We would like to support the adoption of a rule that would allow the submission of an amendment to the residential building code that would increase the energy efficiency. One of the deficiencies right now is that the IECC residential section does not contain any provisions with reference to energy conservation for outdoor lighting. And Susan Harder from East Hampton has submitted a proposal, probably in advance of really when she should have, but a proposal for amendments that would deal with outdoor lighting that would be attached to the buildings to try and make it so that we're not in a lot of conflict with people like, lighting designers and things like that, where each of those amendments would provide additional energy conservation over what IECC has right now. One other state IECC does include shielding requirements, for example, and that's been in effect since 2004, so it's had a 10-year run. So it would be, we would like to encourage any consideration for adopting a rule that would allow the submission of amendments that would enhance the energy conservation over what it is right now. Thank you.
Question. So your testimony would be to support the adoption of the IECC 2012, but to amend it.
To allow for this addition of amendments.
Keep in mind that the amendment of the code would be accomplished during a period of public comment, which is yet to come during the rulemaking period. We have received the comments and they are on file with us. They would need to be reintroduced at that time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith, one last question. The state you mentioned that has the 10-year track record, what would that be?
That's Connecticut.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker I have is Todd Stewart, New York State Building Association.
Good morning, thank you.
Morning.
My name is Todd Stewart. I'm the president of Stewart Construction. We're a home building business and remodeling business in southern Saratoga County. Also, immediate past president of the New York State Builders Association, which is a trade association representing over 2,200 builder, remodeler, and vendor companies with thousands of employees across New York State. I'm here today to address residential provisions of the 2012 IECC that are being considered for adoption in New York State. I recently had the opportunity to serve on the technical subcommittee that comprehensively reviewed and discussed all the changes made to the IECC as they relate to the current 2010 New York State Energy Conservation Construction Code in an effort to determine which provisions would be appropriate for our state to adopt. Regarding that subcommittee, I'd like to state for the record that we in the building industry, builders, remodelers, contractors, and suppliers, all have a huge stake in the development of and the revisions to the codes. We are the ones that implement these changes in the field. We know what works and what doesn't. We're the ones that have to educate the end users, who are our homeowners, our home buyers, as to the importance of improved energy efficiency so that we can sell our product against the less efficient but also less expensive existing housing stock. So we feel it's imperative that we have a seat at the table and a voice in the discussion when these codes are proposed for adoption in New York. We applaud the Code Council and their continued confidence in the technical subcommittees that allow for our voices to be heard, and we implore them to continue to call on these subcommittees when considering future code changes. As to the specific changes we're addressing today, I'd like to speak to just a few items to keep my comments brief. I'll assume that the recommendations of the subcommittee will be available for Department of State and the Code Council to review. First, regarding the requirement that all return air plenums utilized in forced air heating systems be ducted. While we agree that any plenums located outside the building envelope must be ducted, sealed, and insulated to prevent moisture intrusion, requiring plenums located inside the envelope to be similarly ducted is a real problem, both in the added cost to install and the reduced performance of the system. There's simply not enough volume available in those ducts, nor space available in most home designs to add more ducts to make this a viable method of returning air to the furnace. So we urge the Code Council to follow the recommendations of the subcommittee to allow continued use of joist and subspaces as plenums when they're properly installed and sealed. And secondly, mandatory blower door testing. This is, we feel, the most onerous requirement in the proposed changes. It adds a level of inspection during the construction process that is going to introduce many new challenges. Challenges such as, is there going to be a tester available in my area who can get to my job on the day that I need them so that I can keep on schedule? Do I have the time in my schedule to shut down a job for an entire day to perform this test because no one can enter or exit the building during the test? Is my competitor down the road greasing the palm of the tester to get the results that he or she needs, putting me at a competitive disadvantage? Our contention is that the construction, air sealing, and insulation techniques that are required in the code and that will, per the code, need to be visually inspected by the code enforcement official to ensure that they've been performed properly are enough to ensure that the home will achieve the desired performance. NYSERDA, through its Energy Star for Homes program, has proven this over the years with its own blower door testing. So if the insulation and air sealing has been visually inspected to ensure it has been properly installed, how can we justify the added costs and other potential challenges that mandating a performance test introduces? We also take issue with the air exchange maximum rates associated with the testing. Changing the requirements from 7 air changes per hour at 50 pascals to 3 air changes per hour at 50 pascals is an enormous leap in performance. And even during NYSERDA's testing of Energy Star homes, it's been difficult to achieve. We would urge the Code Council to accept the Technical Subcommittee's recommendations of 5 air changes per hour at 50 pascals as a reasonable increase in performance. We urge the Code Council to keep the blower door test as an optional path to prove a home's energy efficiency. Finally, we'd like to state for the record that we think the insulation and fenestration criteria by component, in other words, the prescriptive path to compliance, has been increased beyond the point of diminishing returns. An increase of 30% for ceiling insulation in climate zones 5 and 6, for example. So we are in favor of continuing the use of a simulated performance compliance path, such as ResCheck, to prove energy code compliance. Thank you for your time today. If there's any questions, please, you guys know where to get me.
Just a clarification. Your statement would support not moving to the IECC 2012 as it is published.
As it is published, that's correct. As amended by the subcommittee.
Okay, and you also understand you're not addressing the Code Council here today?
Yes.
Okay. Just a point of reference. The Code Council has not yet seen the results of the subcommittee hearings yet. There are reasons for that, but it's beyond the scope of this meeting today.
But they will at some point.
I do believe that they will, yes. Thank you. Next speaker, Darren Report with the please.
Morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. I'm speaking on behalf of NEEP, the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership. NEEP is a regional nonprofit organization with a mission to promote energy efficiency in houses, commercial buildings, and industry throughout the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. NEEP strongly supports New York State's efforts to create a better energy future for its citizens by adopting the 2012 International Energy Conservation Code as a basis for residential building in the state of New York. New York and its citizens stand to benefit from the adoption of the 2012 IECC in many ways. The IECC is a final work product of a well-developed, long-standing model code development process that involves the nation's leading experts in energy efficiency, building design, and product performance professionals, state and local government officials, product manufacturers, architects, and builders. By adopting the 2012 IACC, the state of New York will stay on track with its energy efficiency goals and will provide benefits to its buildings and homeowners and individual tenants for many years. New construction is the most cost-effective time to install better insulation, quality windows and doors, and efficient heating and cooling equipment that is properly sized. An up-to-date energy code that accounts for the latest in construction practices and technological advances assures that this will in fact happen. The adoption of the 2012 IACC will facilitate compliance and enforcement of the code, as many of the provisions are simpler and easier to apply than previous versions. Builders and code officials can take advantage of free training, free ResCheck compliance software, and other support programs offered through the U.S. Department of Energy. NEEP is opposed to any weakening amendments to the 2012 IACC. Such amendments will only serve to reduce the energy savings achieved by the code. In conclusion, NEEP wholeheartedly endorses adoption of the 2012 IACC as an essential component of the state of New York's overall energy efficiency goals, and is available to assist in answering inquiries about any aspect of the IACC adoption and implementation process. Please do not hesitate to contact me for any technical support and assistance in this effort. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Port. Next speaker I have is Michael DeWine, representing the staff.
Good morning. I'm Mike DeWine. I'm the New York Regional Manager of the Institute for Building Technology and Safety, but here primarily representing myself. As most of you know, I've been supporting the New York State Energy Code since the late 70s when it was first implemented, first with my construction business, Blue Moon Construction, then with the New York State Energy Office, followed by 20 years as the technical director for the Building Codes Assistance Project, and now with the IBTS. I'm here to be as supportive as I can and we can, and urging that we move ahead with the proposals from the New York Energy Technical Committee and with the work of New York Department of State staff and move this residential code adoption and the IECC adoption towards rulemaking and implementation as quickly as possible. I also agree with my friend and colleague, Mr. Stewart, that we need to accommodate the work that was done by the Energy Technical Subcommittee in taking into account the needs and desires of the stakeholders who will be implementing this on the construction side, and move forward with those changes as they were proposed. Finally, I also would like to encourage the Department of State and the Code Council, though I understand this is not a Code Council meeting, to try to move the residential adoption ahead as quickly as possible and as seamlessly as possible as it might, given that the commercial adoption is moving ahead, to decrease any potential confusion caused by the release of our energy code at 2 separate times with separate books and separate references, materials, and what have you. As you also know, NYSERDA is moving ahead with a multi-million-dollar support project that hinges very much on these implementations taking place, and we're glad to be part of that training and support force moving forward, and again offer our support to the Department of State staff in any way we can to support the implementation. Thank you very much.
So just in recap, Mike.
Yep.
Again, your recommendation is to not adopt the IECC 2012 in its current form.
Of course not. We worked very long and hard working through the few technical changes that we did make, and I think they were well supported in committee.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
But
Next speaker I have is Margaret Gorman with the American Chemistry Council.
Good morning. My name is Margaret Gorman, and I'm Manager of State Affairs in the Northeast region for the American Chemistry Council. We're a national trade association representing plastics and chemical manufacturers. In New York State alone, we provide over 40,000 direct jobs, and from those direct jobs, there's another 2.5 jobs in advanced manufacturing in the state, which is the highest in the Northeast region. If you look at the other states, New York is definitely above and beyond in that amount. ACC strongly supports the New York State Department of State to adopt improvements contained in the 2012 IECC into the State Energy Code without weakening amendments. The adoption and successful implementation of the 2012 IECC will help satisfy New York's energy goals and will yield energy and cost savings for New York residents for many years. New York has businesses employing people in the development and sale of building products and systems used to increase the energy efficiency of buildings. Manufacturers participate in regular improvement model codes as a means of delivering the very performance we expect from office buildings and schools and homes. Companies in the advanced manufacturing sector also provide quality jobs for the people of New York. The 2012 IECC is the most recent nationally recognized model energy conservation code and is the final product of a consensus-based national model code development process involving many of the nation's leading experts in energy efficiency, building design, and product performance. Also, New York code officials and other governmental representatives have long been active in the code development process and have served as members of the International Code Council's Board of Directors. The 2012 IECC is the second part of a multi-year effort led by the U.S. Department of Energy and other energy efficiency advocates to bring about a substantial improvement in the residential and commercial model energy codes consistent with national public policy objectives. New York has already adopted the first part of that improvement to 2009 IECC, and by incorporating all of the provisions of the 2012 IECC into the state energy code, New York would receive the benefits of full improvement. We strongly support New York's adoption and implementation of the 2012 IECC, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak before you today.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
And last speaker I have listed is Eric Lacy with the Responsible Energy Codes Alliance.
Good morning.
Morning.
Eric Lacy. I'm the chairman of the Responsible Energy Codes Alliance. We're a group of product and equipment manufacturers, trade associations, environmental organizations, regional efficiency groups, and others who promote the adoption of the latest edition of the IECC around the country. And our goal is to get it adopted in its published form in every state, and I'm here to recommend to you that New York adopt the IECC as it's been written, with no weakening amendments. I submitted a set of comments and a couple of attachments a couple of days ago. I hope those are part of the official record.
Yes.
I also am here to answer questions if there are any questions that have come up since the submission of those comments. I wanted to highlight just a few things from here and based on a few things that I've heard here that I'd also like to be reflected in the record. First, I think New York can have a lot of confidence in the IECC and in the system that produced it. New York code officials and have been for a long time involved in the development of these codes. It's a very good consensus-based process. The 2012 IECC is no exception to that. It's been developed with some of the nation's best. I'd also point out that New York, as you know, is an energy leader in this region. We recently reviewed the 2014 New York State Draft Energy Plan and submitted comments there as well. One component of the draft energy plan for 2014 was focused on progressive building codes and better trainings and more funding for these things. And we submitted comments supporting that on the basis that New York should be adopting the latest model energy codes and implementing those and properly funding them. We also have been involved in the last several code update cycles, and New York has been relatively regular with their code updates, and I think the building quality in New York State has benefited from that. I won't speak to the specific improvements that were in the code because I understand that's not the purpose of this, but I'll speak maybe more globally. The U.S. Department of Energy found that the amount of energy saved, comparing a home built to the 2010 State Energy Conservation Code to the 2012 IECC, the energy savings difference is 26.9% on average, which is pretty substantial when you consider that starting with the 2006 code, over 2 cycles, the Department of Energy and others wanted to achieve a 30% savings. This is a pretty significant savings calculated by the Department of Energy just in one code cycle. And as was said before, this is kind of the second part of the improvement. And those of you that have followed the 2015 IECC understand that the savings jumps have kind of leveled off, and the 2015 is roughly the same. It has roughly the same amount of energy savings. Also, the net energy savings for the homeowner and the owner of a 2012 IECC, once you add in the cost of the energy efficiency improvements and then subtract back out the monthly energy bill savings, over the first 30 years of the home's lifetime, it's close to $10,000 net savings for the homeowner. And the homeowner will see monthly savings or a break-even point within the first year of home ownership. So this is a highly cost-effective code. The Department of Energy analyzed most of the states in the country, and New York is one of those that is the most cost-effective. So this is all very good news for New York. Finally, I wanted to mention briefly the 2015 IECC. I know that's not within the scope of this hearing. I encourage you, and I agree with Mr. DeWine, that New York should move quickly on the 2012 IECC. The 2015 will be published soon. And while the energy savings are probably similar, there's not yet been a Department of Energy determination, cost effectiveness analysis. There's no res check for it. There are a lot of kind of unknowns still with the code, even though we generally understand how it works. I would encourage New York to stay on the same path. It's a well-supported code. It's been analyzed, probably overanalyzed. And so I hope you will continue down this process. It is a code that has been adopted by the end of this year, will have been adopted in a dozen states, in many more localities and in home rule states and cities that have moved beyond their state code adoption process. It's a code that works. It's based on a consensus process. And I will make myself available if there are any questions about the IECC or about RECA.
I just have one question here.
Yeah.
You made a statement, the energy savings for 2015 is about the same as 2012, meaning that there are no additional energy savings to be had by moving to 2015. Is that right?
Yeah, just to clarify, on the residential side, I should be clear, on the residential side, there were very minor changes made to the compliance, the existing compliance options. There was a new compliance option added. And if New York is looking ahead, if for some reason New York is looking at that compliance option, there could be an expedited rulemaking or something to just add that if they were interested.
Mm-hmm.
But the core of the code is very close to the 2012 in overall efficiency.
Very good. That was the only question I had. Anyone else have a question for Eric?
Actually, Eric, if you could detail that at all, is that essentially similar to a HERS or an energy rating system?
Yeah, the energy, HERS is a proprietary system. The 2015 IECC incorporated what's called the Energy Rating Index, which is a scoring system. This is a kind of a separate compliance option. You still have the prescriptive and UA, you have the performance path, and then you have this new ERI option. And it's based on the same sort of concepts as the HERS system. So it's a system that people are going to be relatively familiar with. The 2015 IECC put in place several controls on this. For example, the thermal envelope has to achieve the 2009 IECC envelope requirements. The mandatory provisions of the code have to be met. And then there's a specific set of energy rating numbers or HERS scores, if you're more familiar with that the building would have to meet. Those are all in the code. Now, when the code gets published, we'll have some time to look at those and consider, whether there are any additional energy savings or any loss in energy savings. It's a relatively new thing to the code, though. But that's probably the one major change on the residential side. Does that answer your?
It does.
It begs another question, though. Due to the Federal Energy Conservation and Production Act, the U.S. DOE is obligated to do an energy savings picture, much like they've done for us here. So, what is your take on, say they do this analysis, and they come up with no energy savings? How does that play?
Well, I don't know how they're going to come out on this because it's a totally new compliance option.
Okay.
And historically, the Department of Energy has taken a look at the prescriptive paths and compared them with the prescriptive paths of the previous determination.
Okay.
And in 2009, for example, when the equipment trade-off was taken out of the performance path, DOE said, well, we don't usually consider this, but there could be some additional energy savings in the performance path because you can't trade away these things. And so I don't know how they're going to rule on the energy rating index. I suspect they'll probably treat it as a standalone compliance option and not try to find equivalence, but it's hard to say.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you very much.
I have additional copies of everything I submitted in case.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll take it. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to speak today? Once? Twice? Okay. Before we close, I just want to state a couple of things here. Any electronic submissions that were given to us before this meeting become part of the public record. And if anyone has electronic copies of what they presented today, it would be helpful to us to have that as well. So if you could forward that to us. If you need an email address, let one of us know, and we really appreciate that. It would make our job a little easier. Seeing no one else wanting to speak, I'd like to conclude this session. I want to thank you all for coming this morning and sharing with us your views and helping us to establish our requirement with the federal determination. Thanks again very much.